Hi, I'm Julia Bruton. This is about We Are Woman, a podcast exploring female and new aspects on the topic of VR.
Hello, everyone. I am sitting here today with Michaela Pnacekova. And actually, Michaela and I, we have a little bit of a history. We've known each other now for more than 10 years because we met when I was doing an internship at the Berlin Film Festival. 2010 was that?
11, I think, because that's when I moved to Berlin, 2011.
Okay, wow, it's been a very long time. So hello, Michaela, thank you for being here.
Hello, Julia, thank you for inviting me.
Michaela is a VR creator. You've actually created Symphony of Noise some years ago, and I hope we can talk about that today. And now you are doing a PhD in Toronto, which we're also going to talk about. But as usual in the beginning, I would like to hear a little bit more about your background and how you actually ended up doing VR in the end.
So I was thinking about why I suddenly became so interested into the interactive and immersive media, let's say 2016 it started. And I think one of the reasons was that I actually have a theater background. So I studied theater studies in English and American studies, and I did theater. As everybody who studies theater, at some point they probably directed or acted or, wrote plays, and I did all three things. And until like my mid or end of 20s, when I moved 2011 to Berlin and switched to film and film festivals and forgot about theater because I thought theater is not dead, but there was not enough money. And I was like, maybe I would like to do something where there's more money than in theater. And so I started to work for film festivals for several years. And that brought me again back to basically creation because I missed it. And I realized I need to create. I don't really necessarily want to create platforms for the makers, but I want to be one of the makers. And so I started to produce documentaries at Close & Comedian here in Berlin. And I started as an assistant producer or production assistant, basically, and then built myself up to being a producer. And so I produced 3 feature-length documentaries, and this is one of those documentaries, well, actually, that Stefan Kloss produced, and I was still line producer on it, was Pre-Crime, which is this predictive policing documentary. And we had an idea that we should make an app, an interactive app accompanying the film. And so that's how I co-created with Mike Robbins and other creators and developers. We created this first interactive app called Pre-Crime Calculator in 2017.
Okay, so one of the early ones, yeah. Do you still remember your very first VR experience?
Yes, it was, I think, 2015 at ITFA Dog Lab, which is kind of, I see ITFA Dog Lab as my alma mater in the XR field, because they have been doing such great work. And so 2015, I think I put my first VR headset on, and it was an immersive music video about love. And it was very simple. It was basically music visualization in VR. But I was so immersed and I loved it. And I was like, yeah, I love this.
Now you live in Toronto, in Canada, and you're doing a PhD. Can you tell us on what topic you're working on right now?
So I hope I'm finishing soon, because it's been 4.5 years. So I just need to say that so that I contextualize it.
We all know the big P that was in between.
how long it took. And basically the PhD itself is a research creation project, which is my final thesis, will be an installation and an online archive of different prototypes I have made throughout the studies. And the final thesis is supposed to be an installation that kind of follows a certain user journey, but is contextualized within emotional or affective artificial intelligence. And so I, with the VR piece that we are working on at the moment here in Berlin, we are trying to kind of depict that emotional, the software, the artificial intelligence, and the facial recognition and the voice recognition that are being used at the moment are based not really in like factual science, and it's all more a tradition, like a long-standing tradition of the facial expression analysis, which in the end is basically an arbitrary language of communication. So what we're saying is through that experience, through basically viewing yourself in a mirror, through working with masks, we hope that the user will understand that the facial expressions are culturally constructed, and we want the user to ask themselves what are they feeling and how they communicate it to the outside world.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really, really a very interesting topic, because I remember when we first talked about it and you told me about it, immediately what came to my mind is people, for example, who suffer from depression, and they might smile, and then there will be the analysis throughout the artificial intelligence, but how they feel is going to be quite the opposite. And just to have that possible moment of somebody else telling you how you should be feeling, basically based on your facial expressions, versus how you're really going to feel, that's a game changer, I guess, for many, many people. Is that also going to be addressed in some way? I mean, I really don't know how far we can go into details, right, in terms of what's going on right now. So please tell me, oh, Julia, no, this is something that you'll have to wait till it's finished. But just for the audience, to make them a little bit more curious, is something like that addressed also in terms of making people drastically aware of like these differences between an artificial intelligence that reads your face versus how you feel?
Yes, of course, the conflict needs to be there. That's the whole, basically, that's the whole idea of the piece, is whether you're whether you are in line with what the, let's say, the facial recognition, the voice recognition is reading, and whether you feel the same way. And if not, then you have to, play this game of having to play the emotions, and so perform them. And that's when I hope the change happens, where the user will realize, oh, okay, so if I feel sad and not let's say angry, like let's say I'm being read by the AI as being angry, but I actually feel sad, the only way how I can proceed in this piece is basically to persuade the AI that I feel sad. So the AI needs to read me as sad, and so I need to, perform. being said. And that's that performativity of emotions and facial expressions and voice, how the sound of the voice is a a very important part of performance and performative expressions. And so that's when I hope the transformation will happen.
And also what you said in the beginning, which I think is also a very interesting topic in terms of that our facial expressions have something to do with the direct cultural environment that we are in. And what that means globally, in the field of what you're working on right now. How intelligent actually can an artificial intelligence be in the end of detecting which small changes in a face means what in what culture? For me, this sounds like so totally not doable.
Yeah, that's not doable. No, like the facial recognition at the moment, even voice recognition, is based in, let's say, this theory of facial expression analysis, where it's certain movements, facial movements mean certain emotions, but in the end, they simplify, like it's simplified so much within the system that they can analyze only, let's say, 6 or 7 emotions: angry, sad, happy, disgusted, neutral, maybe surprised. And so we work with these 6 emotions just to kind of also make more visible that we don't feel just 6 emotions, and that these systems are simplifying us as human beings and reading us in a very simple way. And I think we are more complicated than that.
Yeah. What just came to my mind, because, we are women, our podcast, do you think maybe this could also be a possibility for men to get more in touch with emotions in general?
Of course. I think this is I hope this is a feminine kind of a way to kind of express my feminine voice in that sense. But I've seen, like, nowadays I see more and more experiences that are focused on emotions, and I'm happy about that. So I think the change is coming slowly, and I think everybody, men, women, and people of other genders, are kind of like more like, through these experiences, are more like coming to, like, getting to be more in touch with their emotions. And so that's, I hope that we will see more and more pieces like this, and that I will not be the only one, and I am not the only one, for sure. So I just want us to make more pieces like this.
More like that, right? And also, I guess what we'll need to work on, and because that's something I always stumble upon, we need to find new ways of talking about this medium and what it does with us and what it does with storytelling and what is storytelling in the end, right? So this like huge area out there to explore. And I'm very curious about that piece. And you let us know what's going on in that field.
Thank you. I mean, with the narration and the storytelling, you really hit the nail on the head. I'm not sure if you say that in English, but anyway, I was asked many times, what's the story within this piece? And it's similar to Symphony of Noise VR, where there is no story. It's an experience. It's a musical and emotional experience. And so how I tell stories, interactive stories and immersive stories, is basically through emotional and user journeys, and not necessarily through a linear script, through dialogue or anything similar to like linear or filmic design in that sense. And so I think that's important, that these kind of methodologies get more, spread, and we will understand, we get to understand more that this medium or emerging media, but especially VR or XR, whether it's mixed reality or pass-through or virtual reality, we are embodied. So it has a lot to do with the body. It had lots to do with the movement, and it has a lot to do with basically the mind and the environment and the body and the interplay between all of these. And emotions are part of it. And so, basically you can tell stories, and that we come back to theater in that sense. You can tell stories through embodiment and through movement. Dance theater and performative art were like the first that started interrogating these ideas. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to go. Yeah,
definitely. And I also, everything that you just described is for me the reason why I love the medium of VR so much, because it takes away the rules, the so-called rules I've learned also, during creating film. And for me, this medium speaks so much more to me, and I'm going to say to me as a woman. It's so much more freeing. It's absolutely less confusing, which is funny because there are other people out there who probably see it from the absolute opposite direction. But I'm very curious in terms of where we are going to go with this medium, and all the creators out there who right now have a possibility to be a huge part of this and take it into whatever direction it's going to take. So it's it's actually really exciting times right now to be part of this journey. And there was also this thought about, because what was interesting to me when we had our pre-talk about the podcast was this notion of how and where can I actually access virtual reality at the moment as a normal person. So that's basically mostly festivals out there. You do have event situations where then specifically one VR piece or XR piece has been made, but to show a variety of what's actually going on, in our own homes. These are the festivals out there. How do you feel as a female solo creator when you go to festivals and when you watch pieces of other people? Do you feel like you are represented with other solo female artists out there? And if so, maybe also has it to do with certain festivals? Is there something when you think of the last 2 years, or let's say the last year, because the last 2 years was too much Corona still going on, basically. But yeah, like the last year maybe, because I had to think about that myself when we had our talk, and I wanted to, I wanted to hear your opinion on that in terms of can we show what we want to show?
That's a great question. I mean, apart from, there are some, female artists and female creative technologists that work alone or in, let's say, duos, but usually there is a man standing behind the scenes. And I think the same for BIPOC people and other minorities. I think the trust of festivals or trust of funders, it starts with funders actually, I think. The trust is then, I think, smaller if you are only a single artist pitching your thing. Whereas if you have a studio behind you, and the studio is usually 70 or 80% male-based. I mean, that's my experience. Any studio I worked with, there were maybe 2-3 women and let's say 10 men. So really, like the ratio was about 70% 30%, and those women were usually in production or assistant roles, although there are creative and creative technologists and designers and artists that are amazing, and they are part of these studios. And so I'm happy that, they're there, because their visual, I think the visual voice in that sense is for me tangible, in that sense, when it's a feminine voice in that sense. And I think that kind of goes also to, or tackles other cultures, other minorities. So I feel that in order to have more diversity in how stories are told and, how things are made, what is being made, we just need much more of, let's say, diverse companies and yeah.
Yeah, I
Diverse
agree.
voices.
Yeah, exactly. Diverse voices. I just remembered because last week I talked to Ziza, who in Zimbabwe, she holds a festival in Zimbabwe, and also a lab, and she told me that she had a woman in there that was deaf and was creating VR, and I thought, wow. I mean, think of this, right? Somebody who the one sense is missing, and then that person can maybe put a lot more into other ideas or senses or whatever. And I thought, yeah, we should have more also of that in terms of showing what's possible within this medium. And also what just came to my mind is one of the reasons I started VR Woman was to get out of this prejudice of it's a technical medium, and because it's a technical medium, it's more of a male medium, because that's not the case. But still, somehow this notion is out there, even with people who should know better, basically. And so hopefully we can really step by step just take out that notion that has anything to do with your gender, because it doesn't. Obviously, it's actually quite the opposite with this medium.
I mean, it would be interesting to speak to someone, to a curator of a festival, what they think about, let's say, remember 50-50, 2020, the film industry, I think it was 2015 or 2014, when there was this like big promise of that by 2020 we will have 50% of, male and 50% of female films in the festivals. And this was, I think the promise of Berlinale and Cannes and Venice. I think Venice was kind of a little bit struggling with that idea, because, then you start talking about like what's quality, and then what is access, and who's got the money, who gets the money to have the better quality pieces. And so I think this is why I like documentary festivals, because the documentary field or the experimental field as well is there's less money, and so there's also much larger proportion of women. Because if you look at film industry, it's the bigger the budget, the less women directors and less women producers. The smaller the budget, the more women in the crews and everywhere. And I am unfortunately, my experience is that in the XR world or XR industry, it's very similar. And so I wonder whether we could like ask, a curator and what they would think if there was this promise of, 2030 and let's say 50-50, but I don't want to be just like male and female, it's nowadays it's so much more diverse. So I would just like to have much more diverse voices. And they, and even if they have less budget and have less, let's say, the visual quality is worse. Technology is so much about money and access. And I hope that these curators of festivals understand that. And unfortunately, it's usually in those big A festivals where VR is exhibited, it's usually the big names and the big budgets that make it, whereas the small ones don't.
You know, the A festivals that kind of always put the XR next to film. And I'm not sure about this approach because it's really a medium of its own. And it's going to, hopefully in the future, have very different kind of ways of creating it. And so when you're within a festival, you know, and kind of not competing with, you know, the few other sections, but in some way, I guess it's going to be there on a certain level. And as you said, and then they want certain quality to be shown, because maybe, you know, the thing the little student did in her home it doesn't look so well, but it has a great idea for the medium of VR. But can I show this actually at an A festival with all these other amazing made films next to it? So maybe that's also something we'll see. Maybe someday in the future, somebody's going to talk to me about this kind of topic in terms of, is this really the best approach to mix, you know, those two mediums in such a not diverse way when it comes to virtual reality?
The question whether film is a good way to position the XR festivals within that field, well, I think not. But the problem is that we don't, because it's such a new medium, we don't have a specific audience. We don't have yet, you know, a specific audience to draw enough people to come to an solely XR festival. For instance, I would think, let's say, Forum Expanded at Berlinale would be a great XR section. It could go into expanded reality. It can go, you know, in different ways. That's why it's called Forum Expanded, because it's experimental and because it experiments with forms and genres.
What would you say are your favorite 3 festivals worldwide?
ITFA Dog Lamp. Because I discovered VR through them, because they ITFA Dog Lamp rose, like basically grew from a little like exhibition in Braquegrand, where the conference was held. It became in this huge exhibition space in Tolstein, and now they're moving somewhere else. And like they are exhibiting about like now 30 to 40 pieces, in that space, which is amazing. They take risks. They take pieces that are, let's say, unfinished, but they're new and experimental, and so they're doing a great work in that. Although I would like them to do more insight into how diverse that curating and the programming is, and let newcomers and people with reduced access to technology give them a larger chance. So that's number one. I think Sheffield, I was there, I think 2018, and the exhibition, how it was done, how it was spatially made, installed, they really thought it through, and I really enjoyed just like being in that space and moving through the pieces. So I like, for like with Sheffield, what I really value there is their experience with, I think, with exhibition and with exhibiting art and mixing it together with XR. So that's number 2. Number 3, I have to say it's Venice VR, because they just know their shit. They know how to do things. They have this little island in Venice where, you know, you have your own world. They know how to install things. They know how to, how to make an experience out of the whole exhibition. They have a great industry part. I pitched myself in Venice Production Bridge, which I'm so thankful for, and it helped us so much with Symphony of Noise VR. And I think even like the Venice Co-Production Bridge took me to, co-produce the Chomsky versus Chomsky First Encounter prototype, because I met Sandra Rodriguez there in Venice, where she was pitching Chomsky and I was pitching Symphony. So it really does its job.
And it's just a beautiful city and an amazing location, right? Yeah. Great, Michaela. Thank you so much for having this talk with me. We're going to keep in contact, and you're going to tell me when your PhD work is done. And then probably we're going to have another talk about that.
Yes. Thank you, Julia. And I love that you're doing this work, and good luck with VR Women.